I fear growing old. And I also fear dying young. I'm most happy with a vodka martini in my hand, but I can't stand the fact that the chatter in my head won't go quiet until there's a quart of vodka inside me. I hate being in a war zone, but I also feel compelled to see it for myself.
That was a clip from A Private War, and I'm delighted to be joined by its star, Rosamund Pike. Rosamund, how are you doing? Could you set it up for us and also let us know who Marie Colvin was?
Well, it's a story about Marie Colvin, who was an American-born foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times, and she started her career for UPI, went to Paris, had glamorous ideas, as many people do of foreign correspondents. She wanted to be like Martha Gellhorn. You know, you stay up all night drinking martinis, then you realise you actually have to remember the conversation that you've had the night before. But then she was sent to Libya, where she, as a young woman, got a very extraordinary and very rare interview with Colonel Gaddafi. And that sort of set her on her course, because she, got the ear of some of these world's most terrifying leaders, but she also had this tremendous empathy and was able to gain the trust of the people on the ground, the civilians who are hit hardest by war. And so she wrote articles that had an uncanny ability to make conflicts that often seem very far away very, very close. And she lived life with this sort of intensity and passion that obviously has a cost. And I think the film is really, it's called A Private War, and it's about a woman, going solo into these war-torn areas, but also about the private war in one's brain of having been exposed to those things.
I was going to ask you, she's clearly battling on two fronts. She's in very real battles, of course, being a war correspondent, but the intensity with which she lives all of her life. At the very beginning, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say, her relationship is struggling hugely under the strain.
Yeah, and she's just lost an eye at the beginning of our film. We take it from the point that she lost an eye after she'd been into Tamil-held area in Sri Lanka. No journalist had been there for 6 years, and everybody thought she would give up with a severe disability like that, and it actually galvanised her to keep going.
And she talks, doesn't she, at one point about how fragile human life is and how soft the flesh is, and it's sort of an instant reminder of how vulnerable she is in those war zones, despite being incredibly brave. I mean, sometimes I was watching it feeling like it's a bit like watching a superhero, How did you go about approaching a role that has, like I say, this element of a superhero and this incredible vulnerability at the same time?
I think you've obviously got what we intended to convey, so that's really
I
great.
really felt that from your performance.
And, I think she did have this tremendous strength and tremendous vulnerability. I needed to get in touch with my own fear in quite a real way. So I actually went to Lebanon before we started filming, and I was taken there by a landmine charity called MAG, and we went into areas of Lebanon that the public or anybody going on holiday would not get to go, areas that are considered high risk and dangerous. And we went to the minefields, which are still, severely contaminated, landmines strewn everywhere, which they are, systematically uncovering and then detonating. But I was frightened, to be fair, and I had to fill in a proof of life form and give my blood type because anything can happen. And getting on the plane, I've got 2 small boys. I was really anxious, very, very anxious. And it was a great lesson in how Marie, probably felt, because she was going to somewhere far more severely dangerous than where I was going. But it was just interesting how I recalibrated. And 2 days later, I was walking amongst the mines with armour, bulletproof vest and a helmet, and suddenly was treating this as a new normal. And you realise how, with knowledge and understanding, you can have a sort of almost perhaps deluded sense of your own security.
And we see that a couple of times, don't we, when everybody is saying, get down or wait here, stay there, and she's up and off, know. And that comes from her experience, perhaps. But I watched it and I was terrified just from the first battle scene. I mean, they're really vivid. And, I was terrified watching actors in pretend battle scenes, which made me think I just couldn't fathom how terrifying it must have been for her. But I also watched, all the pyrotechnics and whatnot going off quite near you. I just wondered how risky some of those scenes were.
Yes, I mean, there is a sort of, we're working on quite a, relatively low budget film here. So there are fewer opportunities to redo things. So there's an awful lot riding on, take 1, 2, and 3, because that's probably, you're going to have used up all your explosions by then. So there's always an element that is slightly unrehearsed, probably less unrehearsed than it would be in a bigger budget movie. And of course things can go wrong. It's controlled to a very sort of serious degree, but sometimes you've got background cast who are given guns. Yes, they're firing blanks, but, blanks still release a shell. And, there is sort of flying elements, especially when you're firing in a car with people, for instance. We're entering Homs and we're with the FSA fighters and, there's machine gun fire coming at you. And there's obviously a slight hysteria that comes from performing it, because you're driving through darkened streets, you're driving hell for leather. There are, there's a bus on fire, there are cars on fire, there are snipers, pretend obviously, coming at you. But there's a sort of hysteria that can take over, and that's not. Let's be serious. It's not saying that it gives us an experience of what it's like in a war zone. It clearly does not give you the experience of what war is like. But the combination of that plus imagination plus being around Paul Conroy, who was with Marie Colvin when she was killed and has lived through that, the sort of lived imagination of it is very intense.
Sure. So Paul, the photographer we're talking about here, was he on set with you at times?
He was on set, and he came out just to sort of get us on our feet in Jordan, and then he never left.
Wow.
I think it was quite cathartic for him probably to relive those years that he'd shared such intense time with Marie. And he was, a large part of the reason that I had the courage to do this, because if you're dressed up as someone's dear friend and they're struck by the similarity, I suppose, or struck by something they recognise, then it gives you the courage to say, okay, I'm going to keep going with this.
Yeah, and honour it.
It was a big ask. It really mattered to me that I did not take Marie on sort of through me or as a vehicle for myself or anything like that. I had a true north, which was to just embody her as much as possible and give Matthew Heineman, our director, as close as I possibly could to a Marie that he could observe like he was making a documentary, because I don't know if you know, this is his first narrative film, having just made documentaries. He made Cartel Land and City of Ghosts, and this was his transition film, as it were. So he was anxious that he wouldn't get the sort of, the authenticity that he's used to with docs and the kind of happy accidents. And so I knew I just had to be her so totally that he could put the camera on at any moment when I even wasn't aware of it and get some Marie. Yeah.
But let's talk about that embodiment, because I was told, a lot of people lose weight and gain weight. A lot of actors change their physicality for roles. But I was told you lost height.
Yeah, I did actually.
I've never heard that.
No, I'd never heard of that either.
A couple of centimeters of height.
Yeah, I
presumably from the way you were.
From where I was carrying
yourself.
my body. Yeah, because I aim to change. A lot of what I do instinctively. A lot of my body language changed. The way I carry my shoulders, the way I carry my back, the way I walk, the sort of where you distribute weight, the way you carry weight in your face, and I wanted to sort of lose the length of my neck to a degree. And convey that sort of tension. She had tremendous freedom. She loved to dance, and she had this, it could be slightly manic kind of almost puppet quality to her arms, because she'd gesture, big gestures. And obviously her head had quite a staccato motion when she was talking, maybe also driven by the single eye and the need to sort of pierce you with that one eye as well as someone could pierce you with two. But I definitely carried my shoulders higher. And then I went for a medical, because as an actor you have to, be,
of course,
weigh in fit for work for your next job. And the doctor was writing down my height, and I looked over what she was writing, and I said, she was writing 172 centimetres. I said, I'm 173. She said, well, actually, you're 171 and a half, but I rounded it up. And I said, really? I said, can we just check that again? And we went back, and sure enough, this centimetre and a half had gone missing.
That's incredible. There's a moment in the movie where Tom Hollander, as the editor of the Times, says to Marie something along the lines of, where would we be without your conviction?
Yeah.
Which made me think about not just war correspondents, but paramedics and nurses and even teachers and foster parents and just people who care enough to do something for human beings in the world.
It's really moving the way you say that.
Where do we stand without a Marie Colvin?
No,
in
it's
the world?
that's what drove me to do the film, is something very beautiful and pure in this woman's conviction. And the fact that, despite witnessing so much tragedy, she remained an optimist. She was ultimately an optimist who believed that people could make a difference. It's down to us. We can make a difference. We can listen. We can go and we can treat people as individuals, not as a sea of humanity in trouble. I think that was always her gift. She always said, I don't want to know about numbers. I want to know who you are. I want you to tell me your story. And that meant that her articles could then puncture someone back home because they'd recognise something of their mother, their father, their aunt, their daughter in her writing.
And we should spare a thought, I suppose, for Stanley Tucci as well, who, it's a grueling movie in the best possible way, because it's riveting. Stanley Tucci he's the first time I remember laughing out loud with the towel on his head.
Yeah, it's brilliant. He was a joy to work with.
He brings a real kind of, that word, he brings a joy to a section of that film that really benefits.
And you need her to have a kind of mature adult sexual relationship at that point of her life, and also how good is it that, a lot of times a clever woman, we don't explore a clever woman's sexuality in film.
Because we think, they're above that.
Yeah, or something.
They're too important for that.
And so this is a point where you need some vibrant, chemistry with a, mature man. And so it was a gift that Stanley jumped in to do it. And he was just a joy to play with and very, very funny. And Marie had a huge sense of humour. So we could really explore that and have fun. It was, I'm glad you
can see that in their
that
first
out. We
exchanges.
really had fun.
Well, it's an incredible performance. It's an incredible piece of work. You won't remember this, but you and I have actually worked together before. Outside of this, I do a lot of voice work, and we worked on something even more grueling and hard-hitting called Thunderbirds A Go for television. When I say we worked together, I opened the door from my vocal booth for you to come in. And I was about to gush to you about Gone Girl.
Oh.
And then I just
I do remember you were just leaving that big studio.
That's
yes.
right.
Ah, yeah.
I chickened out at the last minute.
Yeah, we
so
introduced you, shook my hand. Yeah. I remember that. It's been a great job, that. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And what do we see you in next?
I also played Marie Curie, who's another woman that I think will surprise people. A formidable, funny, irascible, complicated woman, who changed the face of the 20th century by her discovery of radioactivity, set the course for great good, and also some of the worst inventions that we've come to live in fear of. And that was a joy, because it's directed in a very kind of eclectic, psychedelic way by Marjane Satrapi, who did Persepolis.
Yeah, sure.
And then I've worked with Nick Hornby again, who I'd made an education with, and he's written this delicious bite-sized drama. It's about marital therapy. It's 10-minute episodes, and it's just the time it takes for a couple to have a drink in the pub, him to have a pint and her to have a glass of white wine before they walk across the road to their therapist's office.
Nice.
And it's very funny and very human, and it's with me and Chris O'Dowd.
So loads to look forward to.
And that will be available somehow, somewhere this year. And it's called State of the Union. We just premiered in Sundance, actually, on Monday. But I was not there.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for doing and caring and thinking about the film so much. Thank you.